Thank you very much, and dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here. And actually, what was just presented before is a very basic thing for a sustainable city, obviously. And so let me say a few words about why is it important that we talk about urban systems and sustainability. Let's look at these three numbers. So cities cover only 3% of the whole area of the world. They host more than 50% of the population. They produce 80% of their GDP and also consume 75% of the resources and produce 75% of the CO2 emissions. Probably now less with the new technology, obviously. So actually, this means that we have to leverage on the positive things of cities and try to minimize the negative effects of them. So this means we need a transition. What does a transition mean? You can think of here the pre-development phase, where we are in a maybe unsustainable way, and we want to become more sustainable. And what I want to suggest to you is that we need three types of knowledge to get there. First, we have to understand how the system works, namely what is the metabolism of a city as the metabolism of a human being. Second, we need to know what actually is a sustainable urban system. Where are we going at? And when we know that, we need transformative knowledge, namely to say what are the tools, what are the tipping points, what are the triggers and the barriers to get to that. Let's start with the first one, namely the system knowledge. And here we need to understand, on the one hand, the quantitative component, the natural science component, and the drivers of it. Here an example for Vienna, where you can see immediately water being the biggest flow entering a city and leaving the city. What is actually much more important is this part here, namely the stock. This is the built environment that still, in our developed world, is increasing with a significantly large amount, and mostly of it, it's concrete, construction material, and consumer goods. Now the second question, what is the goal? What are we aiming at? Here we look into questions as what is sustainable for whom? How can we measure what a sustainable city is? Let me show you how difficult it is to answer these questions. You see here these 4 cities, and we're going to make a small vote. Which city or city part of city do you consider the most sustainable one? Who thinks that Paris is the most sustainable one? Paris banlieue. Who thinks that the favelas in Rio de Janeiro are the most sustainable ones? Who thinks that Dubai is the most sustainable one? No, no one. Who thinks that Lausanne is the most sustainable one? Okay, so you can see immediately that we do not agree on what is sustainable. And every person, I would bet, has different criteria upon which we think what is sustainable and what is not sustainable. We're thinking of different trade-offs when we are thinking of the way to go from a less sustainable to a more sustainable point. Now, let's assume we have agreed upon what is sustainable. Then the question is, how do we get there? What are the drivers? And can a transition really get there? And I suggest this very easy schema for you. We start here with our sustainability problems, and we have our old habits, our old institutions, our old ways of doing business. And if we continue like that, all of you, and we agree, the first speaker said it already, we end up in a non-sustainable society. So we have our SDGs, and this is for research and development in industry and in science. As said already in the beginning, this should lead to innovations, and these innovations should lead to the sustainable society. However, I would challenge that, saying that we need to surpass a tipping point, which means that these new technologies have to transfer our old habits into new habits in order to become more sustainable. This means it's not only that we have to develop the technologies, it has to say that the technologies have to be taken up by people in order to change something. When is the best opportunity for doing so? We have found that life events tend to be excellent windows of opportunities for change. Let me take the example of energy efficient buildings when we start to construct a building. When we studied this decision, and you can find that when you get married, you want to buy a house, or you want to build a house, then you have first your orientation phase, and you have your highest preferred energy standard. Then you go meet the architects and engineers, and you plan your house, then you evaluate it, whether you're satisfied with it, and then you recommend something to your friend or your relatives. What we have been finding so far is that the energy efficiency decreases from the orientation phase, what you originally wanted to build, to what you originally did. The good thing about it is you're satisfied, but you would also recommend your friend a higher standard than the one that you chose. Now the question is, what drives actually this decision? Why does this change from originally being a high energy standard to afterwards being a lower energy standard? And this is typically experts playing the most important role in there. Experts not being only architects, but also engineers, but also people who recommend you on the heating systems. And if we, the experts, can trigger and can communicate better with the people taking the decisions, we might actually have also a potential of implementing this technology. So let me conclude. So we need for this transition towards a more sustainable cities and urban systems, these three types of knowledge. We cannot only analyze the system, we do have to create a transformation knowledge and to know where the goal is. And thereby, the normative, that means what is important for whom, how do I think that I would say what sustainability is key. And we can only act on tipping points. So we have to figure out what are the tipping points, when can we trigger change, may it be in mobility, may it be in building, may it be in nutrition. With that, we create what we think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you.